which was to really be comparing two different translators and to see how completely different they are, and so that we can sort of witness for ourselves how really difficult it is to translate poetry, because every word has an impact. It is apparently particularly difficult to translate Hafez because Hafez wrote in the ghazal form, and that was a very specific type of poetry where there was a subject. That subject was the last word in the first two lines of the poem, and you were allowed to change the perspective on that subject over and over and over again if you wanted to. And that is why
I have to put y'all on hold. I'm sorry.
Okay. That is why when you read Hafez, he seems to change his perspective and his subject so frequently. I don't know if you've noticed that about Hafez, but he tends to change subject a lot, and it can be very confusing, and that's why he does it. It's part of the ghazal form.
I thought that ghazals are really just like couplets that have just some loose connection.
They're like couplets that have been strung together. That's exactly right. Yeah. And the form came from from Arabia, and as y'all may or may not know, it was the Arabic culture that brought the Muslim faith to Persia. Persia was originally Zoroastrian. They were not Muslims, and they were forced to become Muslims. They were forced at knife point.
Oh.
So there is still quite a bit of resentment towards the Arabic culture, and that's why when Farishte is with us, she is often very clear about distinguishing Farsi from Arabic and that sort of thing. In Persia, Rumi and Hafez both wrote in Farsi. There were several languages of that area, but Farsi was the primary one where poetry was written, and that's the language that they wrote in. And I want to tell y'all an interesting story. I was at the center one day. I had just been reading Hafez for maybe 2 or 3 years, and there was an elderly man there from Iran who brought his well-loved old dog-eared copy of Hafez with him. And he didn't really speak English. He was with his son-in-law who did speak English. And he said, my father would like to read Hafez to you all. Well, we were all sitting around the table outside the refectory. Jeff was there. And so he proceeded to read in Farsi. And I was eating my lunch and I was like, oh, that's lovely, And so he's reading Hafez in Farsi. He is not offering any translations. And I found that I just started weeping while he was reading, and I could not eat. It was a continual weeping. And I thought, my gosh, if Hafez can have this kind of impact on us in the language we can't understand, wow.
Well, you're very attuned to poetry and very sensitive to that.
I am. That is true. And it's not the first time that I've heard something read in a foreign language and it had a huge impact on me. So I want to share that with you because it's something that I think a lot of people don't realize that you can do. You can just be present with the vibe of the words and the feeling behind them, and you can feel so much. It's just incredible. So if you've never had that chance to do it, I highly recommend it. You can really tell a lot just from sitting with that. So Hafez was famous in his lifetime, world-renowned in his lifetime, in the town of Shiraz, which was considered an extremely special, beautiful garden place. And it was a place where a lot of great poetry came from. And Hafez was considered the sort of pinnacle of Persian poetry, of Persian mystical poetry. And the way that Hafez became a poet is not so dissimilar. Well, it's a little bit similar to Rumi in that Hafez was apparently not handsome and he was not wealthy. This does not bode well for you in terms of romance, apparently, in Persia. So he was working for a butcher, and he was asked to deliver some meat to a very wealthy home. And he saw the beautiful young daughter of the man he was delivering the meat to, and he fell instantly in love, as only a young man can in those kind of circumstances. And he decided to go into that very rigorous protocol in Sufism, where you sit inside a circle for 40 days and 40 nights, and you do not eat anything, and you pray and you ask for what it is you want. And if you succeed, you are granted that wish. And so, of course, very few people succeed at this. You have someone with you to stay with you, and you have to stay awake for those 40 days. So Hafez succeeded in doing this. And at the end of the 40 days, the story goes that the angel Gabriel came to him and said, we have heard your request, and we are here to grant it. And Hafez was so moved by the majesty and the radiance and the regalness of this archangel that he realized in that moment that it was not the love of a girl that he wanted to ask for. It was the love of God. And so he did. He asked that he would know the love of God. And the angel said, this will be granted to you. And that is how Hafez began writing poetry. It was really, Therefore, his poetry is so wonderful and so powerful and so perennial for us. So Hafez, because he was a Sufi, was persecuted several times in his lifetime. And there was a point in which he had to actually leave his post as a teacher and go live in the woods because some fundamentalist took over his town and was, out shooting Sufis for fun, which still happens, of course, in the Middle East. Sufis are still persecuted to this day. And I don't know if everybody realizes this, but we as Baba lovers are technically connected to the Sufi order because Ivy Deuce, who is the head of Sufism Reoriented here in the United States, petitioned Baba to become the head of Sufism Reoriented. And he initially said no. He said no several times, and she just kept asking, and he eventually said yes. So when you're at the center, you actually could meet Iranian people there who are only allowed to come here to the center because Baba is considered technically a Sufi.
Wow.
I know, right? A lot of people don't realize this. And there is actually a wing of Sufism Reoriented in Washington, D.C. that are very devoted to Baba. And if you go there to their houses where they all live together,
I went.
Oh, you have? Yeah. I've heard it's pretty fabulous. And I've never been there, but they recite Baba's name several times a day and have his photographs everywhere. And it's quite seriously dedicated to Baba.
It was kind of otherworldly. Everything was white. And, it was just a little strange.
Yeah. As people who are very intense can be. I personally love Sufism. I'm not a Muslim. I never could be one. I'm too proud of women to be a Muslim. But other than that, I could be a Sufi in a second. I just am so excited about Sufism. But yeah, it can be very devotional and very intense. So I can imagine it was a little bit overwhelming. I've never been.
Kind of like Stepford.
Like what?
Stepford.
Stepford wives, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's not good.
Everybody was very, very happy and, dressed in white. And it was a little bit cult-like, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. Very interesting. It was the Sufism group in California that funded Daniel Ladinsky's first book. I heard God Laughing Renderings of Hafez. They were actually responsible for this very first book of Daniel's that came out of Hafez, which is interesting to note. So I'm going to just jump in here to just kind of bring us back into the place where we were before of reading Geoffrey Squires' translation. Then we are going to read Robert Bly's translation, and then we are going to read some of Geoffrey Squires' work of Hafez, and then we're going to move to Daniel Ladinsky. So this is a poem we ended with last week. Hear them. And if you can put yourself on mute, that would be awesome.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's all right. The garden is refreshed by a breeze from another world, and I am blessed with a joyful wine and my paradisal love. Why should a tramp not boast of being a king on such a day, with a cloud for his pavilion and the field his banqueting hall? To me, this vernal month of May points a moral take, cash in hand rather than relying on credit. Do not place your trust in enemies, for no illumination will result if you light the candle in your cell from the lamp of the synagogue. Restore your soul with wine, for this ruined old world has it in mind to make of our dust bricks. Oh, do not enter my inebriation in the black ledger of my actions, for who knows what the hand of fate has inscribed upon our brows. And when finally the time comes, do not draw back from my cortege, for though Hafez is steeped in sin, surely he is on his way to heaven. I'm going to read this one by Robert Bly, same poem. The garden is breathing out the air of paradise today. I can sense myself and this lively wine, and this friend whose nature approaches the divine. It's all right if the beggar claims to be a king. His tent is a shadow throned by a cloud. His banqueting hall is a newly sown field. Paradise is here in the simple tale that the May Meadows tells. The wise person lets the future and its profits go and accepts the cash now. Please don't imagine that your enemy will ever be faithful to you. The candle the hermit lights will always flutter out in the worldly church. Make your soul strong then by letting it drink the secret wine. This rotten world has its own plans to press our dust into bricks. My life is a black book, but don't rebuke a drinker like me too much. No human being can ever read the words written on his own forehead. When Hafez's coffin comes by, it will be all right to follow behind. Although he is a captain of sin, he is on his way to the garden.
Those two are so different.
So different. So different. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's incredible. It really gives me, you know, that this small book of Robert Bly took him 14 years to translate this small book. Can't quite imagine. I met someone who told me recently I should learn Farsi so I can, you know, help translate Hafez. I thought, are you out of your mind? I just thought that was the craziest thing I had ever heard in my life. So I'm just going to read some of Geoffrey Squires' work. He is an Irish poet that was born in 1942. He's still alive. He translates medieval Irish poetry. I can't quite imagine what that would be like. And he worked with a Farsi speaker to do these translations. So the Farsi speaker would take the work and literally translate it and then send it over to Geoffrey Squires, who would then try to put it into a poetic form. And I'm sure they had a lot of back and forth to arrive at what seemed like the most appropriate word. So All right. You have only to look at me and my pain intensifies. I have only to look at you and my longing grows and grows. You do not inquire about me. I wonder what is in your mind. You do not try to cure me. Perhaps you do not understand. This is no way to behave, to abandon me in the dirt of the road. Pass by and ask again so that I may become the dust that you tread. I shall not let go your skirt until I have turned to dust. But if you come where I lie, that dust will reach out to you. I suffocate with grief. Oh, when will you breathe on me? You consign me to hell, but deny responsibility. One night in the dark, when I searched for my heart in your hair, I beheld you face to face and drank from that crescent bowl. Suddenly, I drew you to me and enfolded in the waves of your curls. I put my lips to your lips and knew a kind of death. Let Hafez bring you happiness. Dismiss his enemies, for while he enjoys your warmth, why should he fear their cold breath? The thing I really love about Sufi poetry, and I think it's what holds me to it so intensely, is that sometimes you cannot tell when a Sufi poet is writing if they're talking about a person or God. And I just love that. I love that.
That's a very
line
good
is
point.
crossed over. Yeah. For me, it's how I experience life. You know, I experience Baba in people and people in Baba, and it really holds me to a finer line, you know. At break of day, the nightingale said to the newly awakened rose, do not play games with me, for the garden has seen many a one like you. Laughing, the rose replied, it is true. So I am not hurt, but a lover should not speak curtly to his beloved. If you want to sip ruby wine from the bejeweled goblet of those lips, you must string together with your eyelashes the carnelians and pearls of your tears. He who has not abased himself and swept the tavern steps with his cheeks will never know love's fragrance in all eternity. Last night in the garden of Iram, when the dawn wind brushed the curls of the hyacinths, I cried, O throne, where is your visionary cup? He said, alas, that providence which always watched over us succumbed to sleep. I guess I'll know this, but a lot of the Sufi poets had to write in a disguised manner so that people wouldn't fully understand what they were talking about. So when he refers to the wine in the tavern, he's really referring to the place where they would gather, you know, as Sufis, and wine is really a metaphor for love.
Hmm.
Yeah, and as I understand, the poetry is sort of written in code of
Yeah.
of human love, when in fact it's
Yeah.
about divine love,
Right.
which is why it sounds like it could be for either.
Although what's so interesting, if you look at the work of Rumi, is that he obviously was a lover of God, and yet his poetry was really about Shams of Tabriz, who for him represented the pinnacle of a teacher and his closest companion. So yeah, I mean, there it is again, that whole, you know, instead of an either or, it becomes a both and in Sufism, you know. And I remember when I started reading Sufi poetry about 12 years ago, it really helped me. I don't know about if y'all have ever experienced this, but I think growing up as someone who was interested in spirituality from a very young age, I always felt there was a dichotomy between here's spirituality, and here's my body, and here's the physical world. And they always seemed very far apart, and they always seemed like they were in conflict. And when I started reading Sufi poetry, I saw an example of what it meant to no longer have them battling with each other, to really have them married to each other. And for me, that was a great example of what I felt like was the truth, that we're not meant to be in a battle with those two things. We're meant to have them come together somehow. I don't know if y'all have experienced that, but I think most people on a spiritual path have experienced that at some point in time, you know, feeling like the worlds are far apart. So, all right. Oh, that's one I just read about comparing them. Any comments, y'all? No, those are the last ones. The ignorant are bewildered by the looks we give one another. Winks, glances, the games we play. Let them think what they want. I am what I seem to be. Reason would suggest that we are the pivot of the compass, but love knows we are spinning round. God has indentured us to those with sweet lips. We are their slaves, and they are noble lords. We are poverty-stricken, but yearn for wine and song, a pity we cannot pawn, our cashmere gowns, to boast about love and then complain about the behavior of the beloved. It is a sign of a charlatan. Love's dilettantes deserve to be spurned. My eyes are not the only place where your face appears. Sun and moon act as its mirror also. Bats, being blind, cannot describe the sun, for even visionaries are dazzled by that reflection. If the pious do not understand Hafez, who cares? The devil flees from those who know the Quran. These translations of Hafez often mystify me, I have to admit. That's why I love Daniel Ladinsky. As controversial as he is my favorite, and I realize he is extremely controversial. And I'm sure, does anybody not know about Daniel Ladinsky being controversial? We can talk about it if you don't know about it. I'm assuming y'all know all about it. Super controversial. So I'm going to just jump into some Daniel Ladinsky. This was the book that I first started reading of his, which I loved so much. And this is how I came to Baba, by the way, was through the work of Daniel Ladinsky. Somebody gave me the gift, and I was going to hear Daniel. He came to Asheville, and I thought, gosh, I love that work so much. I wonder if he has anything else. I went to Malaprop's bookstore and found an early version of Daniel's work that had Baba's photograph in the front, and I just was very taken by that photograph and wanted just to spend some time with it. And then an hour later, I met Kathy Riley, who invited me to her house and said, hey, that's that same person whose photograph was in Daniel Ladinsky's books. And so that's how that happened.
I'm sorry, Tracey, I have to go, but
Okay.
I'll have another class I'm supposed to be teaching.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll see you next week. And thank you for your help with the beamer.
Yeah, I will absolutely stay on it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye. Well, first small group today. So this is one of my favorites, called The Great Work. Love is the great work. Every heart is first an apprentice that slaves beneath the city of light. This wondrous trade, this magnificent throne your soul is destined for, you should not have to think much about it. Is it not clear an apprentice needs a teacher who himself has charmed the universe to reveal its wonders inside his cup? Happiness is the great work. Every heart must first become a student to one who really knows about love. So good. Were you going to say something, Diana?
Yeah, it's kind of like when you see different painters do their portraits of Mayor Baba. Um, we know the subject, or the subject of the painting, but filtered through each person's experience and perceptions and ability to paint, we see Baba differently.
Yeah.
We know it's Baba, but it's so different. And the same, I think, with these translations, they all have some kind of fragrance or flavor of the person who's done the work because of their choice of words, how they present the images, and it feels the feeling is very different.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I tend to think of Daniel Ladinsky as being a poet in his own right. I don't think he needed to ever say the word Hafez. I mean, because you cannot recognize Hafez's poetry in this work, really. And I've tried. I mean, I've really tried to find. Let's look at one of Daniel's poems and see if we can find it, in the more literal translations, and you can't. I mean, there's maybe like a few words that are similar, but they're so different that I think he could have legitimately simply said, these are my poems, and it would have been less controversial, obviously, for him. And it would have been a legitimate thing for him to say, because he's clearly an extremely brilliant poet. Like, just, it blows my mind how brilliant he is, even amidst his controversy. This is called What Do the White Birds Say? The earth has disappeared beneath my feet. It fled from all my ecstasy. Now, like a singing air creature, I feel the rose keep opening inside me. My heart turned to effulgent wings. When has love not given freedom? When has adoration not made one free? A woman broken in tears and sweat stands in a field watching the sun and me trade jokes. But never would Hafez laugh at your blessed labor of finding peace. What do the dancing white birds say looking down upon burnt meadows? They say, all that you think is rain is not. Behind the veil, Hafez and angels sometimes weep. Because eyes are rarely glad, and your divine beauty is still too frightened to unfurl its 1,000 swaying arms. The earth has disappeared beneath my feet. Illusion fled from all my ecstasy. Now, like a radiant sky creature, God keeps opening. God keeps opening inside of me.
I love the word opening.
I know. I know. I love that poem so much. It's one of the ones I've memorized, actually. So I called Daniel Ladinsky. I finally got his number and I called him to try to meet him, but he blew me off. He later did come and meet me. But I'm sure he has a lot of people calling him, wanting to meet him. But we did later become friends, and I was so grateful for that. But anyway, he recited this poem to me over the phone. So it's fun to read it. The title of it is It Felt Love. How did the rose ever open its heart and give to this world all its beauty? It felt the encouragement of light against its being. Otherwise, we all remain too frightened. This one's called I Saw Two Birds. Both of our mouths can fit upon this flute I carry. My music will sound so much sweeter that way, with your breath and my breath poking each other in the ribs and kissing. I saw two birds on a limb this morning, laughing with the sun. They reminded me of how we will one day exist. My dear, keep thinking about God. Keep thinking about the beloved, and soon our nest will be the whole firmament. Forget about all your desires for truth. We have gone far beyond that. For now, it is just pure need. Both our hearts are meant to sing. Both our souls are destined to touch and kiss upon this holy flute that God carries. So beautiful. This one is called In Need of the Breath. My heart is an unset jewel set upon the tender night, yearning for its dear old friend, the moon. When the nameless one appears again, 10,000 facets of my being unfurl wings and reveal such a radiance inside that I too begin to cast light so sweetly into this world, like a lamp through the streets. My heart is an unset jewel set upon existence, waiting for the friend's touch. Tonight, my heart is an unset ruby, offered bowed and weeping to the sky. I am dying in these cold hours, waiting for the resplendent glance of God. I am dying because of a divine remembrance of who I really am. Hafez, tonight, your soul is a brilliant reed instrument in need of the breath of Christ. I know, right? So good.
That was really,
Right? So
Yeah.
good.
really beautiful.
Oh my gosh, so good. It's one of the ones I perform when I perform poetry. So happy to share that with people.
The imagery in this one is easier to follow than some of the others, and it's more consistent, so you aren't jumping around that much.
Right. Yeah. I really appreciate when he does that, when he doesn't change topics too many times, because sometimes I have trouble tracking him. And I'm like, I just don't understand that. Yeah. This is called Like a Life-Giving Sun. You could become a great horseman and help to free yourself in this world, though only if you in prayer become sweet lovers. It is a naive man who thinks we are not engaged in a fierce battle. For I see and hear brave foot soldiers all around me going mad, falling on the ground in excruciating pain. You could become a victorious horseman and carry your heart through this world like a life-giving sun, but only if you and God become sweet lovers. Speaking of, marrying the spiritual and the physical. Love that. That's what it's called, So Many Gifts. There are so many gifts still unopened from your birthday. There are so many handcrafted presents that have been sent to you by God. The beloved does not mind repeating, everything I have is also yours. Please forgive Hafez and the friend if we break into a sweet laughter when your heart complains of being thirsty. When ages ago, every cell in your soul capsized forever into this infinite golden sea. Indeed, a lover's pain is like holding one's breath too long in the middle of a vital performance, in the middle of one of creation's favorite songs. Indeed, a lover's pain is this sleeping when God just rolled over and gave you such a good morning kiss. There are so many gifts, my dear, still unopened from your birthday. There are so many handcrafted presents that have been sent to you from God. So true. Such a good reminder. This one is another favorite of mine. It's called Love is the Funeral Pyre. Love is the funeral pyre where I have laid my living body. All the false notions of myself that once caused fear, pain, have turned to ash as I have neared God. What has risen from the tangled web of thought and sinew now shines with jubilation through the eyes of angels and screams from the guts of infinite existence itself. Love is a funeral pyre where the heart must lay its body. So true. This one is called The Ear That Was Sold to a Fish. It is true. I once had an ear that got sold to a fish. Lean back. I will be glad to tell you about this. But first, I must digress a bit, perhaps way beyond any logical sequence of events. Let's see, we could start anywhere with any word in this fertile, luminous world in which I live. What is the first letter of your alphabet? A. Oh, that would be just fine. Art is the conversation between lovers. Art offers an opening for the heart. True art makes the divine silence in the soul break into applause. Art is, at last, the knowledge of where we are standing in this wonderland. When we rip off all of our clothes and this blind man's patch, this veil that got tied across our brow. We are partners straddling the universe. Someone inside of us has a foot upon each resplendent pole. Someone inside of us is now kissing the hand of God and wants to share with us that grand news. You will find yourself knee-deep in ecstasy when all your talents to love have reached their heights. Hafez, time, space, and boredom are just passing fads. All your pain, worry, and sorrow will someday apologize and confess that they were a great lie. Let's see. Oh, yes. Look how we got distracted beyond logical events. I remember we were talking about the ear that got sold to a fish. It is true. The moon once put a price upon my head and then hired a gang of young thugs. It seems the beloved felt I had been telling too many secrets, giving too much of his precious wine away for free. So I got called before a fat, burly judge, but I pleaded my own case well. I said, it's all the fault of prayer. It has filled me with divine treasures that I love to loosely spend. So I bought a ticket for my eye upon what the white sky bird that never touches the ground, and I bribed an ancient deep sea fish to buy my ear and drown. Now, whenever the beloved whispers or even slightly moves, I get a scouting report that 1,000 saints could envy, and I would pawn their hearts to know. Hafez has become one of the greatest spies upon God that this world has ever seen. That is why the moon once got rough. That is why that fat burly judge once crowded all of heaven into a small jury box. God knowingly did risk my case becoming famous if I won. I think he really wanted my name to spread forever wide. Have you ever contemplated the thought, as I once did, that the beloved already knew everything long before, so long before we were ever born? But now to end this drunken song with its essence in refrain, art is a conversation between lovers. True art awakens the extraordinary ovation. It's lovely. Page 50, one that I love. Someone put you on a slave block and the unreal bought you. Now I keep coming to your owner saying, this one is mine. You often overhear us talking, and this can make your heart leap with excitement. Don't worry, I will not let sadness possess you. I will gladly borrow all the gold I need to get you back.
Nice sentiment.
I know, isn't it?
Mhm.
Such a true one too. Well, we could read some more Hafez, or we could sort of talk about Hafez a little bit. What are your thoughts on Daniel Ladinsky's translations?
I'm not a good person to talk about translations because I really haven't spent that much time with them, and I don't know them that well at all. I just would repeat what I said earlier. Each translation is different. Each reader gives something different to the reading. I'm thinking of Farishte and her translations, which are very fragrant. It's so individual.
Yeah, she does such a lovely job of it. Oh my gosh, she's so good. Yeah. Yeah, I'm hoping to get her to do a whole, evening for us. I've tried several times to get her to come and do an hour. I'm not sure why she's not coming, because she's so good. Every time she reads, I'm so happy. She has such feeling to the translations that she's done. You can just really tell that she feels so connected to that work.
Well, plus being, a speaker of Persian and having lived in Persia, I mean, grew up there. So
Right.
So some of that is tradition. I mean, she read this poetry in school.
Right.
When she was young.
Yeah. Yeah, I think she shared that she felt like Baba was really with her when she was doing those translations, and to me that really comes across when you hear them. They just feel so full of light somehow. They just feel so. They almost feel effortless. I know they were not effortless. I know she worked very hard at them, but there's an effortlessness about them when you hear them, which I always think is a hallmark of a master at work.
Yeah, because she got it right.
Because she got it right. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully she will keep doing that work. Well, this is a book I don't really read from. I heard God laughing. It's not one I read from ever, but Daniel gave it to me, and so I have it. So we can, these were his first poems. So I'm just going to read one or two. We're almost out of time. This one's called Exquisitely Woven. Wayfarer, your body is my prayer carpet, for I can see in your eyes that you are exquisitely woven with the finest silk and wool. And that pattern upon your soul has the signature of God. And all your moods and colors of love come from his divine vats of dyes and gold. Wayfarer, your body is my shrine. If I had the eyes of a peer, which means saint, you would see Hafez kneeling by your side, humming playful tunes and shedding joyful tears upon your wondrous hidden crown. Oh, that's lovely. This one's called A Golden Compass. Forget every idea of right and wrong any classroom has ever taught you, because an empty heart, a tormented mind, unkindness, jealousy, and fear are always the testimony you have been completely fooled. Turn your back on those who would imprison your wondrous spirit with deceit and lies. Come, join the honest company of the king's beggars, those gamblers, scoundrels, and divine clowns, and those astonishing, fair courtesans who need divine love every night. Come, join the courageous who have no choice but to bet their entire world that indeed, indeed, God is real. I would lead you into the circle of the beloved's cunning thieves, those playful royal rogues, the ones you can trust for true guidance, who can aid you in this blessed calamity of life. Hafez, look at the perfect one, at the circle's center. He spins and whirls like a golden compass beyond all that is rational, to show this dear world that everything in existence points to God. Lovely. Gosh, I'm sorry we're such a small group tonight. Hafez is my favorite poet.
I think it just means that you're going to have to redo it again.
Yeah, I actually would love to do it again. Yeah.